So for today's entry in my combos and neutral series, we've got one of the most iconic characters in Smash, Captain Falcon. As usual, I'll be covering combos first, then we'll be getting into an interview at around the 5 minute and 30-second mark with Fatality, who's a very good Falcon player, where he'll share with us some of his insight on Captain Falcon's neutral game, and other good ways to use him. Let's first start off with throw combos. Down throw is one of Captain Falcon's most reliable combo starters. At these percents, you can follow up with a neutral air, then an up air. Against heavier characters or fast fallers, you can link multiple neutral airs before you close out with an up air. Just make sure you fast fall your neutral air immediately after the two kicks come out, such that you land with no lag, so that you can connect the next one as soon as possible. Percents higher than this, you can combo straight into up airs. At specific percents, even if they try to DI away, it's possible to get quite a few in, as long as you space yourself and time your fast fall properly. Now I think you know what happens when we combine his grab with a dash. As you can see, Captain Falcon's dash grab is pretty unique, as he carries an insane amount of momentum with him. Make sure you hit down immediately after the grab to minimize the distance between you and your opponent after the throw. This allows for some very powerful follow-ups if the opponent doesn't DI the throw away in time, which is completely possible due to how fast Captain Falcon's down throw animation is. At these percents, against heavy and medium weights, you can forward throw into a footstool, then fast fall as soon as you can, then down air. If done correctly, the opponent will be locked. After that, you can pretty much punish however you want. Against lightweights and fast fallers, however, forward throw won't work, so you need to down throw instead, then follow up the same way. Any percents higher, go for a knee. If you happen to down throw the opponent near the edge with a dash throw, at around these percents, you can go for an up air. At this point, there's a really good mix-up opportunity. To avoid being pushed further to the blast zone, your opponent may try to air dodge your next aerial. If you predict this, wait for it, then down air for an early kill. Next, let's talk about a move you've already seen a lot of, up air. The only way to combo someone from the ground with it is to fast fall it. So a fast fall up air can lead into a down throw at these percents. Anything higher, just up airs, or a knee if they're high enough for it to kill. If you happen to land this near the edge at these percents, you can go for an up tilt meteor, and a down air as the percent rises. There's a small window at around these percents where a fast fall up air can lead into a footstool. If you land it successfully, you can follow their DI into a down air, then up airs or a knee. Landing an up air over a platform is very good for Falcon, cause it can make it much easier to string together his aerials. At about these percents, if you hit someone with a rising up air, you can fast fall while doing another up air, into a knee. This setup works well against heavy and medium weights, but it's inconsistent against lightweights and fast fallers. Usually with the help of a platform, there are instances where you'll carry the opponent closer to the blast zone, in which case you can follow up with a neutral air at around the mid-percent range, which can lead into a kill. There's also an opportunity for a footstool if you hit someone with a rising up air at a fairly specific percent. This can even be from a down throw if they don't DI properly. After the up air, immediately jump over them and mash jump. Follow their DI and down air them, same as the previous example. Then you can go for another footstool, or just aerials. As you've seen, similar to up air, neutral air is also a great move for comboing. Against heavy, medium, and lightweights at low percents, you can string together multiple neutral airs and finish off with an up air. Percents higher is the other way around. After your first neutral air, go for a full jump up air, then follow up with more up airs. Of course, landing a raw neutral air on the ground can be quite situational, since it only works on tall characters, and will just completely miss shorter ones. On the other hand, the first hit of neutral air has fixed knockback, so if you get the hit, it'll always lead into a grab at any percent. If they're at high percents, go for a down tilt. Not only this, but it also has enough hits done for you to actually follow up with a footstool against heavy, medium, and lightweights. This isn't a very practical setup unless you get a hard read, since the hit must be very close to the ground and to your opponent for the footstool to connect in time. But if you do get it, between these percents, go for a footstool, down air lock, then you can repeat it until they're high enough for your up air combos to work. Any percent higher, they won't be locked anymore, in which case you can follow up with a throw combo. Next, we've got back air. This move has a strong hit and a weaker one. To get the weak one, you have to hit the opponent in the later part of the animation. If done correctly, you'll also land with no lag, which gives you enough time to dash up for a grab at these percents. Percents a bit higher follow up with an up air against heavy, medium, and lightweights, and a dash attack against fast fallers. Landing the weak hit is definitely more situational. Getting the strong hit is much more likely, in which case you can also follow up with a grab, but the percent ranges where this will work will of course be lower. As for Falcon's dash attack, you can only follow up with an up air at really low percents. And the last move I want to talk about is down air. Now follow-ups after a down air on the ground is pretty inconsistent, simply because the opponent has the option to tech, and the window to do so is quite large. But if you do get it and the opponent techs, Falcon's jab can catch them before they can act, so long as your down air doesn't connect too high. Of course, there's also a chance they may miss their tech, or they simply can't tech due to a footstool. Either way, if that happens, you can follow up with up airs or a knee, depending on how high they go. So that concludes the combos. Now let's get right into the interview with Fatality. First of all, Fatality, thank you for coming here to share some of your knowledge with everyone.
Thank you.
So the first question I have for you is, what's a good way to play Captain Falcon in the neutral? Is he best played aggressively, defensively, or a mix of the two?
Ideally, you need to be a mixture of the two. What I basically do in the neutral game to start with is I usually spend the first 10 to 15 seconds not necessarily doing anything, but I use aggressive movement options not to actually force anything, but rather to state a presence and just have time to watch them. Captain Falcon as a character is extremely dependent on both the player being very competent, the player being extremely knowledgeable of matchups, and then being good at reading people simultaneously. I believe that Captain Falcon is actually one of the hardest characters in the game to use at top level, which is one of the reasons why you're seeing Falcons accomplish that much with the character. But ideally, you need to be defensive just long enough until you have the right information to go in. Because you don't want to be defensive just as a general play style. You only want to use it as a means of getting information. Because if you just try and use defensive tools, abusing dash dancing in your burst range, it's highly linear, and you ultimately get outclassed by so many other characters that are just so much better at zoning than Falcon is. Likewise, if you just go ham all the time, you're going to get outclassed by characters who have just better up-close frame data like Pikachu, Fox, which is why he's extremely dependent on reads.
Okay. Well, as for my next question, what are some effective ways to approach with Captain Falcon?
Captain Falcon's most effective approach tools generally differ based on different speed classes. He wants to approach characters more or less the same way if they're of a certain speed class. Like, he approaches fast characters mostly the same way. He approaches slow characters mostly the same way, etc. With that in mind, with fast characters, it's usually predicated on you want to get in their burst range, and then from there, if you are worried about them counteracting your linear approach options, what you might do is say, fall back and use fast fall up airs right when you get in their burst range. Or the most important thing about approaching fast characters is differing your run speeds and dash dancing. Like, something that's very underused with Falcon, especially with approaching people, is varied run speeds. If you angle the control stick differently while you're running, you can actually run at different speeds. And that's extremely important for just mixing up your approach game and making your fast fall uppers much more accurate, because Falcon can get eaten out by pretty much everything. And so most of effective approaching is just about recognizing when they expect you to approach, figuring out how they're going to try and counteract you, and then counteracting them. Because Falcon is at heart a counter character. It's all about figuring out how your opponent is going to try and counter you, and then basically just being on the next Yomi level at all times. Captain Falcon can't really just use his tools to exert unwinnable situations on his opponent like most characters that are good can. He's just all about reads, all about it.
Alright. My third question is, how should Captain Falcon recover back on stage?
This kind of boils down to what I said earlier, in that I think Captain Falcon is one of the hardest characters in the game to use at top level, because his advantage state is pretty bad, and while his individual recovery moves are not the greatest, there's enough flexibility in them to where you can, generally speaking, get through anything, provided you know exactly what it is you're going to have to get through. So knowing how to recover with Captain Falcon is less about, say, this is what you do against this character, this is what you do against that character. It's all about knowing all of your options at all times and then just adjusting them based on what your opponent is going to try to do about it. And the easiest way for Captain Falcon players to do this is to treat most of your recovery options as being done on reaction to various movement positions. Because more often than not, characters, when they're going to try and edge guard you, they're not going to be able to represent all of their possible options at once. So what you need to be able to do is recognize, say, are they right at the ledge? Are they a little further at the ledge? Are they off stage? What distance are they at relative to you? What angles? Then try and figure out all of your possible options. And then from there, either go off of reads, or if there's a possible option that just beats all of them, which there sometimes is, you just do that instead. A lot of times it's worth it with Falcon to try and recover on stage instead of at the ledge, because getting up from the ledge can be such a pain, and you're heavy enough to where a lot of times if someone just hits you at the ledge and then you just are above the stage, that's okay because you're back on stage.
All right. Now, what are some of Captain Falcon's strengths and weaknesses?
His biggest strengths are that he has easily one of the most terrifying punish games in the game. If the Captain Falcon player knows all of their potential combo strings and they're able to get reads, it's one of the reasons why I probably do more damage on average with combos than all but a few players. The character is terrifying when he touches you, provided you can get all of the reads, because Captain Falcon has the movement tools to where if you can predict how your opponent is going to react to damage potential, you'll be able to shut down all of their options and just kill them. Most Captain Falcon players are far too conservative with their punish games, whereas literally every single time I touch you, if I can even conceivably turn it to death, I will try to do so. I always try to push the limits, and I feel like Captain Falcon players need to do that as well.
Your Falcon is definitely exhilarating to watch, though how about weaknesses?
Well, like I said before, aside from his dash grab, his neutral game is extremely honest. Another thing is that one of his biggest weaknesses is that he gets punished by a lack of matchup knowledge extremely hard. He's such a volatile character, and his neutral game tools, aside from dash grab, are generally very honest, and so he can get so easily obliterated by almost every character, provided they know what they're doing and you don't, that you have to know what you're doing at all times against players of all skill levels, against all the different kind of characters. It asks a lot of the player. It's doable, but it requires a lot of dedication, which is one of the reasons why I don't think people should secondary Falcon. Main or bust. It's okay to have a secondary, but if you're secondarying the character, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you should probably just play someone else.
All right. My next question is, what's a good counterpick stage for Captain Falcon?
Smashville. Smashville, Smashville, Smashville.
Very confident pick there. Though, how come?
Well, a lot of the same reasons that Sheik loves it so much. It just gives you more means to extend horizontally centric combos, which he has a great many. There are so many ways you can use the platform to just get really, really early kills. You can literally do Nair strings from 0, carry them onto the platform, and then convert them to death. And it's not even unrealistic. Otherwise, he loves Battlefield, and sometimes he likes FD. Sometimes.
Why sometimes?
FD is more of a matchup-centric pick, whereas he just loves Battlefield and Smashville, just period. His other stage choices are basically just matchup-centric or maybe a player counterpick.
Okay. Next question is, what is Captain Falcon's strongest matchup? And what's his worst?
His worst matchup is probably Pikachu, but he might honestly not have a single matchup that's worse than 45-55.
Wow, that's not bad.
But he currently has, I think, 18 or 19 45-55s. He has a lot of them, but at the same time, because nothing is really worse than that, he's a very solo viable character because his matchup spread is very balanced. And like most of his 45-55s are very, very slight 45-55s, or could even potentially become even one day. But since the character has such a deep skill curve and there's just so much more that can be done to optimize him in the future, he could become much better later on. It's just that period has not yet come.
I see. So you'd say he has the tools, but it's dependent on whether or not the player can execute them properly, so to speak?
Yeah, and he just needs more time to grow as a character. It's going to be years before Captain Falcon reaches anything that even begins to resemble what his peak will look like. He's really hard, plain and simple. It's not obvious that he is, but anyone who actually plays this character will tell you this.
So even against higher tiers, you're saying he can go pretty even with them?
Pretty much. He basically just has a very balanced matchup spread, which makes it to where as long as the player is really good, they'll more or less be able to just beat everyone ahead of them. It's all about the player and whether they're good enough. Because 45-55 is not steep enough to where you can't realistically win that matchup at top level. Plus, Captain Falcon is an uncommon character, so even though he has a ton of very slight disadvantageous matchups, the simple reality of the matter is that if you're a dedicated Captain Falcon player, you're in all likelihood going to have much more experience in any of these given matchups he slightly loses to than the player ahead of you, which is going to more or less make up for the fact that it's a slightly losing matchup and basically turns it into realistically almost an even matchup at top level, which obviously if you're top level, that means you're going to be able to win a lot. You just need to be dedicated so that you can take advantage of that experience.
All right. So my next question is, what control scheme is best for Captain Falcon, in your opinion? Do you think there's an optimal scheme, or does it depend on the player's playstyle?
I don't think there necessarily is per se, but I do recommend a control scheme with tilt stick Bidou variants. A variant of Bidou was actually discovered by a player in our local scene named Stash, where you can keep tilt stick. You just have to set a shoulder button to attack. It has far less applications than Bidou, but it still enables like some of the basic things. And like you won't be able to do like sliding spot dodges or anything like that, but everything that's not like super technical, it helps with. And I highly recommend it for every Falcon player because perfect pivot is the future with this character.
Though, why do you feel this pseudo Bidou control scheme is the best?
Because I think Captain Falcon needs to have access to basically frame perfect pivots to just optimize all of his defensive options, pressure strings, things like that. Something that's quickly becoming really important with Falcon is things like you can jump towards someone, reverse arrow rush, empty hop, and then if you perfect pivot backwards from there, if you just carry your momentum straight forward, but because if you're facing backwards while doing it, you can move a huge amount of distance while still effectively empty hopping, which almost gives you like a wave dash. It's basically wave landing, but in Smash 4. And it's extremely underused for like safe baiting or like throwing out an aerial and then using that to basically wave land and just get away. It just makes your movement options so much more powerful. And it's very practical with aerials because you can just activate Bidou literally while you're doing the aerial, which is what I do.
How about tap jump? Should it be on or off?
I don't think Captain Falcon should use tap jump. Smash DI is extremely important for the character because of how easily he can get bodied by a gazillion different things. That being able to smash DI without having to risk losing your jump is extremely important.
Alright, for my final question, what do you think of Captain Falcon as a character in the current metagame?
Current metagame, I think he's good enough to just be a respectable character at top level. I would say that he's not really more than that right now. But in the future, he could be somewhere around the top of high tier. I definitely think he could be top 15 one day, or maybe even like several years from now, he might even be able to get close to top 10. Not right now. He has an extremely deep learning pool, and there's just so much more to be optimized with him that I feel like a lot of characters are more or less like starting to reach their peak, but I don't think that's the case at all with Falcon. Which is why I think he's going to continue to rise up the tier list because the players are going to get better as they get more faith in him.
And you're going to show them that faith, right?
I'm trying my best. Hopefully that's enough. My biggest advice to them is just to be extremely dedicated to the character above all else. Don't secondary him under any circumstances. It's okay to main him and have a secondary, but not the other way around.
Huh, okay. Interesting. Well, Fatality, thank you once again for sharing your insight with everyone.
It's been a pleasure.
Fatality does have a YouTube channel, Twitter, and Twitch. Please give him a follow to get updates from him. They're all on the screen here and in the description. Also, a big thanks to my Patreons, Sylvian Bay, Bernard Smith, Brooke Miad, Ethan Stevenson, Silver, and many others. Really appreciate your support. And of course, thank you everyone else for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in my next video.